a flicker in the dark. The night is heavy, a blanket of fog curling over the flatlands of Kherson, where the air tastes of damp earth and distant smoke. A single lantern sways in the wind, its faint glow cutting through the mist, casting long shadows across a makeshift camp. A young soldier, no older than 25, sits on an overturned crate, his hands trembling as he clutches a crumpled photograph. The edges are worn, the faces in it blurred by time and touch. A family, a home, a life left behind. His breath catches as a low hum breaks the silence, the unmistakable drone of something mechanical slicing through the sky. His eyes snap upward, searching the blackness, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The lantern flickers, then dies. Darkness swallows him whole. Somewhere nearby, a voice whispers in the night, urgent and hushed. They're coming. The soldier's fingers tighten around the photograph, slipping it into his pocket as he rises, his silhouette merging with the shadows. The hum grows louder, closer, a predator circling its prey. He doesn't move. Not yet. His chest rises and falls, each breath a quiet rebellion against the fear clawing at his insides. This is not the beginning, but the precipice of something greater, a moment where courage and dread collide. Rewind to 3 days earlier, when the first whispers of a daring plan reached this quiet corner of southern Ukraine. A plan to break the iron grip on Kherson, to carve a path to the Black Sea, to bring light back to a land shrouded in uncertainty. This is the story of ordinary souls caught in an extraordinary moment, where every step forward is a defiance of the dark, whispers of a plan, context of the Kherson counteroffensive. The late autumn of 2022 draped southern Ukraine in a restless quiet, where the flat, fertile plains of Kherson stretch toward the horizon, kissed by the slow-moving waters of the Dnipro River. The city of Kherson, once a bustling hub of trade and culture, sat heavy under occupation, its streets silent save for the occasional rumble of armored vehicles. The region, a patchwork of golden fields and scattered villages, was a gateway to the Black Sea, its ports a lifeline for grain and hope. By November, the air had turned sharp, with temperatures dipping to single digits, and a persistent fog clung to the lowlands, blurring the line between earth and sky. Rain came in fits, turning dirt paths into rivers of mud, challenging every step of those who moved through it. The military situation was a delicate balance of exhaustion and determination. Ukrainian forces, bolstered by months of preparation and international support, had begun to shift the tide. Their units, a mix of seasoned volunteers and young conscripts, were equipped with a patchwork of weaponry, some modern, some decades old. Across the river, opposing forces held fortified positions, their lines stretching along the Dnipro's banks, reinforced by concrete barriers and entrenched posts. The occupiers had dug in, their supply lines strained but intact, their presence a shadow over the region. Both sides knew the stakes. Control of Kherson meant control of the south, a step toward the sea, a chance to breathe free. Geographically, Kherson was a chessboard of challenges. The Dnipro River, wide and sluggish, split the region, its bridges either destroyed or heavily guarded. The surrounding countryside offered little cover. Flat, open fields where wheat once swayed now hid snipers and mines. Villages like Chornobaivka and Pravdin became focal points, their names whispered in briefings as potential flashpoints. The weather added its own weight. Days of drizzle softened the ground, slowing vehicles and men alike, while nights brought a biting chill that tested resolve. Fog was both ally and enemy, concealing movements but sowing confusion. The world beyond watched with bated breath. News of the counter-offensive flickered across screens in distant capitals, where leaders debated aid packages and sanctions. Volunteers from across the globe sent supplies, drones, medical kits, warm clothes, while civilians in occupied towns hoarded food and whispered of liberation. The conflict was not just local, it was a thread in a larger tapestry of global tension, though for those on the ground, such matters felt distant. Their focus was survival, the next step, the next dawn. In a small command post on the outskirts of Mykolaiv, maps were spread across a wooden table, their edges curling from use. Officers spoke in hushed tones, their voices mingling with the crackle of radios. A plan was taking shape, a coordinated push to break the hold on Kherson, to outmaneuver the entrenched lines, to restore a city to its people. It was a gamble, requiring precision, courage, and a touch of luck. For the soldiers tasked with carrying it out, it was more than a mission. It was a promise to those waiting on the other side of the river, to families huddled in basements, to a future they could scarcely imagine. Among them was Andrei, a 25-year-old from a small village near Vinnytsia, whose name would soon be etched into this moment. His story, like the land itself, was one of resilience, shaped by the weight of duty and the pull of home. Faces in the fog, characters, and their inner worlds. Andrei knelt beside a rusted tractor in a field just outside Mykolaiv, his fingers tracing the creases of a photograph tucked inside his jacket. The image showed a younger version of himself, standing between his mother and younger sister, their smiles bright against a backdrop of sunflower fields. He was 25 now, but the boy in the photo felt like a stranger, a farmer's son who dreamed of studying engineering, not carrying a rifle. Born in a village near Vinnytsia, Andrei had grown up tending crops and fixing machinery, his hands calloused from work long before war touched his life. When the conflict began, he volunteered, driven by a quiet resolve to protect the land that raised him. The photograph was his anchor, a reminder of why he was here, and what he might never return to. His inner world was a storm of contradictions. Fear gnawed at him, fear of failing his unit, of never seeing his family again, of the unknown waiting across the river. Yet there was hope, fragile but stubborn, that his actions might mean something, that they could bring his sister back to a free home. He carried guilt, too, for leaving his mother alone, her voice trembling during their last call. "Come back to us, Andrei." Duty weighed heaviest, a mantle he wore not for glory, but for the people of Kherson, strangers he felt bound to by shared soil. At night, he dreamed of his village's quiet mornings, the smell of fresh bread, the hum of bees, memories that felt like another life. Beside him was Olena, a 30-year-old medic from Odessa, whose sharp wit masked a heart bruised by loss. She had joined the army after her brother, a volunteer, was wounded in the east. Olena's hands were steady, her mind sharp, but her eyes betrayed sleepless nights, haunted by the faces of those she couldn't save. She carried a small notebook, filled with sketches of the sea and poems she never shared. Her reason for being here was simple: to keep others alive, to be the difference between a last breath and a second chance. She feared the chaos of battle, the moment when her skills might not be enough, but she buried that fear under a fierce determination to act, to move, to heal. Then there was Mykola, the unit's grizzled commander, a 45-year-old from Lviv who had served in earlier conflicts. His face was a map of lines carved by years of hard choices, his voice low but steady, like a river wearing down stone. Mykola had a daughter in Poland, safe but distant, and he carried her last letter in his breast pocket, rereading it in moments of doubt. He didn't speak of his fears, but they lived in the way he checked his men's gear twice, in the pause before he gave an order. His dream was not for himself, but for his daughter's future, a Ukraine where she could return without fear. These three, bound by circumstance, formed the heart of a small unit tasked with a critical role in the Kherson push. Their fears, hopes, and dreams intertwined, each carrying a piece of home into the uncertainty ahead. Andri's quiet resolve, Olena's defiant compassion, and Mykola's steady hand were not just their own. They were the pulse of a nation refusing to break. As they prepared to move, the photograph, the notebook, and the letter were silent promises, tying them to lives they fought to reclaim. March through the mist, on the way to battle. The night before the push toward Kherson, the air hung thick with mist, cloaking the fields outside Mykolaiv in a ghostly veil. Andri's boots sank into the mud, each step a labored pull against the earth's grip. The unit moved in a staggered line, their silhouettes faint against the dim glow of a crescent moon. The world was reduced to sounds, the squelch of boots, the clink of gear, the low hum of a distant generator. A cold drizzle fell, seeping through Andri's jacket, chilling his skin but sharpening his senses. He adjusted the rifle slung across his chest, its weight a constant reminder of the task ahead. The plan was simple in words. Cross the river, secure a foothold, open the path to Kherson. But in the quiet of the march, it felt like a mountain. Olena walked a few paces behind, her medic's pack heavy with supplies. She scanned the line of soldiers, her breath visible in the cold, her mind racing through mental checklists, bandages, tourniquets, morphine. She hummed a soft tune from her childhood, a lullaby her mother used to sing by the Black Sea, its melody a fragile thread to a world beyond the war. The sound was barely audible, but it steadied her, a quiet act of defiance against the tension knotting her stomach. She caught Andri's eye and offered a small nod, a silent pact that they would see this through together. Mykola led from the front, his steps deliberate, his eyes scanning the horizon. He carried a map in his head, every bend of the Dnipro, every village along the route etched into memory. The terrain was both ally and adversary. Flat fields offered speed but no cover, while the river's edge was a maze of reeds and mud. He paused to check his radio, the static crackle a lifeline to the command post miles away. His voice was low, issuing orders with calm precision. "Stay tight, watch the flanks." His men trusted that calm, even as their hearts pounded with the unknown. The march was slow, deliberate, the unit weaving through abandoned farms and skeletal orchards. A dog barked in the distance, its cry swallowed by the fog. Andri's mind wandered to his village, to the apple trees his father had planted, now untended. He wondered if they still bore fruit. The thought was a fleeting comfort, quickly replaced by the weight of the moment. He glanced at the photograph in his pocket, not daring to pull it out in the damp. But its presence was enough, a tether to why he walked this path. As they neared the river, the air grew heavier, the mist thicker. The faint outline of a destroyed bridge loomed ahead, its twisted metal a scar against the night sky. Mykola raised a hand, halting the unit. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the lap of water against the bank. Somewhere across the river, Kherson waited, its people, its streets, its hope. The soldiers crouched low, their breath mingling with the fog, each man and woman grappling with the same unspoken question. What would the dawn bring? For Andri, it was a vision of his sister's smile. For Olena, the chance to save one more life. For Mykola, the weight of leading them all home. The river was their Rubicon, and crossing it would demand everything they had. As they prepared to board small boats hidden among the reeds, The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for their next move. The river's edge. The battle begins. The Dnipro River lapped against the small boats, its dark waters reflecting slivers of moonlight as Andri's unit slipped across in near silence. The fog clung to them like a second skin, muffling the creak of oars and the soft splash of paddles. Andri gripped the side of the boat, his knuckles pale, his heart a steady drumbeat against the quiet. The plan was clear. Land on the western bank, secure a narrow strip of land near Pravdine, and hold it until reinforcements could follow. It was a foothold, a crack in the wall that held Kherson captive. But as the boats neared the shore, the night erupted. A sharp crack split the air, a flare, its blinding arc soaring overhead, bathing the river in a sickly green glow. Andri's breath caught as shouts echoed from the bank, followed by the staccato of gunfire. The fog, once their shield, now betrayed them, scattering the light and sowing chaos. "Down!" Mykola hissed, his voice cutting through the panic. The boats lurched as soldiers dropped low, the water cold against their hands. Andri's mind raced. Had they been spotted? Was it an ambush? The plan had hinged on stealth, but the flare suggested their approach was no secret. Olena, crouched in the boat behind, clutched her medic's pack, her eyes scanning for movement. The gunfire was sporadic, not a full assault, but enough to pin them in the open water. She whispered to herself, a mantra to stay focused. Breathe, move, help. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of what might come. She caught Andri's glance, his face pale but set, and nodded. A silent promise to keep going. Mykola signaled for the boats to veer toward a cluster of reeds, a desperate bid for cover. The unit moved as one, oars slicing faster, the shore now a shadow through the mist. But as they reached the bank, a new sound emerged, a low mechanical hum, like a swarm of angry bees. Drones. Andri's stomach twisted. He'd heard stories of their precision, their unblinking eyes in the sky. The unit scrambled onto the muddy bank, slipping in the mire, their gear heavy with water. Mykola barked orders, his voice steady despite the chaos. Spread out, find cover, hold the line. The first moments on land were a blur of motion and instinct. Andri dove behind a crumbling stone wall, once part of a farmer's fence, now a lifeline. Bullets kicked up dirt nearby, each impact a jolt to his nerves. He clutched his rifle, its metal cold against his palms, and forced himself to breathe. The fog swirled, mixing with smoke from a distant explosion, painting the night in shades of grey and orange. He thought of the photograph in his pocket, his sister's smile, and pushed the fear down. He had to move, had to act. Olena sprinted to a wounded soldier, a young man named Pavlo, who'd taken a graze to the arm. Her hands moved with practiced calm, wrapping a bandage as she whispered encouragement. "You're okay. Stay with me." Pavlo's eyes were wide, but her voice anchored him. She worked fast, aware of the drones circling above, their hum a constant threat. Mykola, meanwhile, rallied the unit, directing them to fan out and secure the perimeter. His radio crackled, but the signal was weak. Reinforcements were delayed, caught in the mud, miles away. They were alone, at least for now. The battle's opening was not a clash of armies, but a test of wills. The unit faced a sudden twist. Their stealth had failed, and the enemy was closer than expected. Andri spotted movement in the fog, a shadow shifting behind a tree. He raised his rifle, heart pounding, but hesitated. Was it a soldier? A civilian? The moment stretched, his finger hovering over the trigger, until Mykola's voice cut through. "Hold fire unless you're sure." The shadow vanished, leaving Andri shaken, but relieved. The unit pressed forward, inching towards their objective, a small rise overlooking Pravdin. Every step was a gamble, every sound a potential threat. In the chaos, moments of clarity emerged. Andriy saw Olena drag Pavlo to safety, her small frame defiant against the odds. Mykola moved like a man who'd seen this before, his calm a beacon for the others. The team worked together, their movements synchronized despite the fear, their trust forged in shared purpose. The rise was in sight, a low hill that could shift the tide if they held it. But the drones still hummed, the gunfire grew closer, and the fog offered no promises. For Andriy, Olena, and Mykola, this was the crucible, where courage was not a shout, but a quiet choice to keep moving forward. A choice in the dark, the sacrifice, and turning point. The hill near Pravdina loomed through the fog, a low rise of churned earth and scattered stones, its crest barely visible under the flickering light of distant flares. Andriy's unit had fought their way to its base, their boots sinking into the mud as gunfire crackled sporadically from the tree line beyond. The drones still circled above, their hum a relentless reminder of the eyes watching from the sky. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and wet soil, and every breath felt borrowed. The objective was simple, but brutal. Hold the hill until dawn, when reinforcements might break through. But time was a luxury they didn't have. Andriy crouched behind a jagged boulder, his rifle steady, but his heart racing. He could hear Mykola's voice, low and urgent, coordinating positions over the radio. The signal was patchy, the words fragmented. Hold. Flank. Delayed. Olena was nearby, tending to another soldier whose leg was caught in barbed wire, her hands moving with a calm that belied the chaos around her. The unit was stretched thin, their numbers too few to cover the hill's perimeter. Andriy's eyes darted to the shadows, searching for movement, his mind wrestling with the fear that they were surrounded. Then it came. A sharp, mechanical whine, louder than the drones. A mortar round screamed overhead, slamming into the hillside with a deafening roar. Dirt and stone rained down, and a cry cut through the night. Pavlo, the young soldier Olena had bandaged earlier, was hit, his body slumped against a ditch. Olena scrambled to him, her face pale but focused, her hands pressing against a wound that bled too fast. Andriy's stomach twisted. He wanted to help, but Mykola's shout pulled him back. "Andriy, cover the left!" The enemy was pressing closer, their silhouettes flickering in the fog, testing the unit's line. Mykola's plan was unraveling. Without the hill, the push to Kherson would stall. Reinforcements were still miles away, bogged down by mud and ambushes. The unit was alone, and the hill was slipping from their grasp. Andriy saw it in Mykola's eyes, a flicker of doubt, quickly buried under resolve. The commander knelt beside him, his voice steady but heavy. "We need a diversion. Draw their fire. Give us time to fortify." Andriy understood before the words were fully spoken. A diversion meant someone had to move into the open, to pull the enemy's attention from the hill. It was a death sentence, or close to it. His throat tightened, the photograph in his pocket suddenly heavier than his rifle. He thought of his sister, her laugh, the sunflower fields. He thought of his mother's voice. "Come back to us." But he also saw Olena, still fighting to save Pavlo, and Mykola, carrying the weight of every life in his command. Someone had to act, or they would all fall. "I'll go," Andriy said, his voice quieter than he intended. Mykola's eyes met his, searching for hesitation, finding none. The commander gripped his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the cost. Andriy didn't wait for permission. He slipped from behind the boulder, moving low, his heart pounding as he crept toward a cluster of ruined trees to the west. The plan was reckless. Fire a few rounds, make noise, draw the enemy's focus. If he was lucky, he'd make it back. If not, the hill might hold. The fog was his only ally as he moved, the cold air biting his lungs. He fired into the darkness, the crack of his rifle echoing like a challenge. Shouts followed, then the whine of drones shifting course. Andriy ran, zigzagging through the mud, his boots slipping, his breath ragged. Bullets kicked up dirt around him, but he kept moving, drawing the enemy's fire away from the hill. In his mind, he saw his sister's face, a beacon pulling him forward. Back on the hill, Mykola rallied the unit, using the distraction to fortify their position. Olena, her hands stained with Pavlo's blood, looked up, realizing what Andriy had done. Her heart sank, but she kept working, her fingers steady despite the ache in her chest. The gunfire shifted, the enemy's focus pulled westward, giving the unit a precious moment to dig in. Mykola directed the soldiers to pile stones and logs, creating a makeshift barrier. The hill held, for now. Andriy reached a ditch, collapsing into it as bullets tore through the air above. His chest heaved, his hands shaking, but he was alive. The drones were closer, their lights cutting through the fog. But the hill was quieter now. The enemy's advance slowed. He'd bought them time, a fragile sliver of hope. As he lay there, the photograph slipped from his pocket, landing in the mud. He reached for it, his fingers brushing the faces of his family, and whispered a promise to himself. He would see them again. The sacrifice had shifted the tide, but the night was far from over. The hill was theirs, but at a cost that weighed heavy on every heart. The silence aftermath, and the cost. The first light of dawn crept over the Pravdine hill, a pale grey that struggled to pierce the lingering fog. The gunfire had faded, replaced by an eerie stillness that settled like dust over the churned earth. The hill was theirs, a fragile foothold won through the night's chaos, but the victory felt hollow, heavy with the weight of what it had cost. The air carried the faint tang of smoke, mingling with the damp scent of mud and river water. Scattered shell casings glinted in the weak light, each a silent marker of the struggle that had unfolded. Andriy lay in the ditch where he'd taken cover, his body aching, his breath shallow but steady. The photograph, now smeared with mud, was clutched in his hand, its edges curled from the damp. He stared at it, the faces of his mother and sister blurred but vivid in his memory. He had survived, against all odds, but the adrenaline was gone, leaving a hollow ache in its place. He crawled back toward the hill, his movements slow, each step a negotiation with exhaustion. The drones had retreated with the dawn, their hum replaced by the distant call of a bird, a sound so ordinary it felt out of place. On the hill, Olena knelt beside Pavlo, her hand still pressed against the bandages she'd wrapped around his chest. His breathing was shallow, his face pale, but he was alive, for now. Her medic's pack lay open, its contents scattered in the mud, a testament to the frantic hours she'd spent saving who she could. Her eyes were red, not from tears but from the strain of the night, the weight of every life she'd fought for. She looked up as Andriy staggered back, relief flickering across her face. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice hoarse. It wasn't a question, but a statement, as if saying it aloud made it real. Mykola stood at the crest of the hill, his silhouette stark against the rising sun. His radio crackled faintly, a voice confirming that reinforcements were finally moving, slowed, but not stopped by the mud. The hill had held, a small but critical step toward Kherson's liberation. But Mykola's face was etched with lines deeper than before, his eyes scanning the unit, or what remained of it. 2 soldiers were gone, their absence a wound that no strategy could heal. He clutched the letter from his daughter in his pocket, its words a distant echo. "Come home, Tata." He wondered if he still could. The battlefield was a canvas of ruin. A burned-out tractor lay tilted in a ditch, its metal blackened and twisted. The ground was scarred with craters, the grass trampled into a sea of mud. A single boot, abandoned, sat upright as if waiting for its owner. The fog was lifting, revealing the outlines of Pravdina's houses in the distance, their roofs sagging under the weight of war. Somewhere beyond, Kherson waited, its people still holding their breath. The hill's capture had cracked the line, a step toward freeing the city, but the cost lingered in the air, as tangible as the smoke. Andriy sat against a stone, his rifle resting across his knees. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The unit was quieter now, each soldier lost in their own thoughts. Olena packed her supplies, her movements mechanical, her mind replaying the night. Every bandage, every cry, every life she couldn't save. Mykola walked among them, checking wounds, offering a nod or a quiet word. His calm was a tether, holding them together when the world felt ready to unravel. The silence was not empty, but full of relief, of grief, of questions with no answers. Andriy thought of his village, of the sunflowers that might still bloom despite everything. Olena remembered her brother, his laughter, and wondered if she'd done enough to honor him. Mykola saw his daughter's face, a future he fought for, but might never see. The hill was theirs, but it was only a beginning, a single note in a song that stretched toward the horizon. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the mud, a distant chair rose from the river. Reinforcements were crossing, their boats cutting through the water, bringing the promise of more hands, more hope. The unit looked up, their faces weary but unbroken. The fight for Kherson would go on, but for now, they had held the line. The silence held them too, a fragile space where they could breathe, remember, and carry on. A promise kept, reflection and message to the viewer. The sun hung low over the Pravdine hill, its light filtering through a haze of dust and lingering smoke, casting a golden glow over the scarred earth. Andriy sat on a makeshift bench of stacked crates, the photograph of his family now safely tucked back in his pocket, its mud-stained edges a testament to the night he'd survived. The hill was secure, a fragile victory etched in the silence of the morning. Reinforcements had arrived, their voices a low hum as they set up defenses, their presence a reminder that the fight for Kherson was far from over. But for Andriy, Olena, and Mykola, this moment was a pause, a breath to feel the weight of what they'd done and what it meant. Andriy's eyes traced the horizon, where the Dnipro River glittered like a ribbon of hope, winding toward the Black Sea. He thought of his sister, her laughter, the way she'd chase him through the sunflower fields as a child. The photograph was more than a memory now. It was a promise to return, to rebuild, to ensure those fields bloomed again. He wondered if she'd understand why he'd risked everything, why he'd run into the dark to draw the enemy's fire. He hoped she'd see it not as recklessness, but as love, a love for home that burned brighter than fear. Olena sat nearby, her medic's pack closed, her hands finally still. She held her notebook, its pages filled with sketches of the sea and half-written poems. In the quiet, she added a new line. In the fog we carry each other. It wasn't enough to capture the night. The lives saved, the lives lost, the weight of every choice. But it was hers, a small act of defiance against the chaos. She thought of her brother, his smile, and felt a flicker of peace. She'd saved Pavlo, and others too. Her hands, though stained with mud and blood, had held the line between life and death. She looked at Andriy, then at Mykola, and felt a bond forged not just in battle but in shared humanity. Mykola stood apart, his gaze fixed on the river. The letter from his daughter was in his hand, its words worn from reading. "Come home, Tata." He'd carried it through the night, a talisman against despair. The hill's capture was a step toward Kherson, toward a future where his daughter could return to a free land. He thought of the two soldiers they'd lost, their faces now part of the weight he carried. He didn't speak of it, but his silence was a prayer. For them, for his men, for a country that refused to break. His leadership had held the unit together, but it was their courage, their choices, that had turned the tide. The hill was more than a tactical gain. It was a symbol of what ordinary people could do when pushed beyond their limits. The people of Kherson, waiting in basements and shadowed streets, were closer to freedom because of this night. The path to the Black Sea, to a Ukraine unbroken, was clearer now, though the road ahead was long. The cost was etched in the mud, in the exhaustion on every face, in the silence that followed the gunfire. Yet in that silence, there was hope, not loud or triumphant, but quiet, like the first light of dawn. This story, born from the Kherson counteroffensive, is not just about a hill or a city. It's about Andriy risking everything for a promise to his family. Olena, holding life in her hands amidst chaos. Mykola, carrying the weight of leadership and love. It's about the human spirit, fragile yet unyielding in the face of war's shadow. What does courage mean to you? Is it the choice to run into the dark, to save a stranger, to carry on when hope feels distant? These are the questions that linger, carried on the wind across the Dnipro, waiting for your answer. Ukraine. Frontline War Stories brings you these untold tales of humanity, not to glorify war, but to honor those caught in its grasp. Subscribe to hear more stories of sacrifice, brotherhood, and resilience. Share your thoughts below. What does it mean to hold the line, to keep a promise, to hope for peace? Let's reflect together on the strength it takes to face the dark and still see the dawn.